Hey guys, so today we're going to be talking about another $500 budget build. Last week I made a video about a $500 build using an AMD Ryzen 5 5500. This computer is going to be essentially the same computer, except it's going to be using an Intel i3 12100F. Obviously different motherboard, but everything else is going to be pretty much the same. I'll make sure the build doesn't require any BIOS updates. So we're going to compare which $500 build is better for gaming, the Intel build or the AMD build. It's going to be a perfect 1080p machine. If you have an abusive girlfriend or wife that only lets you spend about $500 on your gaming machine, this video is for you. And for anybody else looking to build a PC for around $500, it's going to be really sicko mode. So before we get started, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below. And every video I post will be more sicko mode than the last. All right, let's get to it. With current pricing, it's around $515. Now, the Intel Arc A750 right now is priced at $219. I was actually able to get it for $199, which would have got the price of the computer down to about $495. So it'll definitely be under $500 if it's good. You're able to get the A750 on sale for $199. Regardless, the build is around 500 bucks. All right, let's talk about what parts I went with. So obviously I went with the i3 12100F. And for $85, this processor is a steal. I bet you $1,000 you can't find a better processor for 85 bucks. It's a 4-core, 8-thread processor, has a base power of 58 watts, and I'm gonna be cooling it with a stock cooler. This stock cooler is actually not that bad looking, and it had zero heat issues during testing. Now the 13100F is newer and does perform slightly better, but it costs $30 more and it would put us way over budget. The 12100F would be just fine. I would actually let my wife use this processor when she played Hogwarts Legacy until I damaged the motherboard. I was trying to take out the processor and I accidentally dropped it. It was kind of tight in the case and it broke some of the CPU pins in the socket. So now one of the RAM slots doesn't work. It doesn't boot. If there's 2 RAM sticks, it only boots with 1. So I built her a different build with the Ryzen 5 5500. But anyways, moving on to the motherboard. For 80 bucks, you can get this MSI Pro H610. It's very basic looking, but it has everything that you need. PCIe 4.0, an M.2 NVMe slot, and it's compatible with the 12100F right out of the box, so no BIOS update needed. And it's the cheapest motherboard you can get. Now moving on to RAM. With 16 gigs of silicon powered DDR4 3200 MHz RAM, for this speed and capacity, this is the best price you can get. And it's not pretty, but it'll work. Don't get DDR5 RAM, it's not worth it. Also, don't let people convince you that 8 gigs of RAM for gaming is enough. I've seen videos on other people's $500 builds, and they go with 8 gigs of RAM. This isn't 2008, 8 gigs of RAM is not enough. You could always upgrade with another stick, but trust me, you're gonna wanna start with 16. 8 gigs is gonna be not very sicko mode. Now moving on to the SSD, I went with a Crucial P3, and it has decent speeds for PCIe Gen 3. For a couple more dollars, you could go to the Crucial P3 Plus, which is PCIe 4. This being a budget build, I didn't really think it was necessary, but I'll let you decide if you want to spend a couple more dollars. And I went with a 500 gig because games are so big now that a 256 gig will probably fit one big game and the OS, and that's about it. So do yourself a favor and go with a 500 gig. Now let's talk about the GPU. The Intel Arc A750 is the best bang for the buck, especially if you can get it for $199 like I did. It easily outperforms the RX 6650 XT while being cheaper, as well as the RTX 3060. Even at the $219 price, it's still a pretty good deal. There's really no argument you can make. For $200, this is the best GPU you can get. The previous case I used on the AMD build is no longer available, so I had to change up the case. So I went with the Cooler Masterbox Q300L. I personally built in this case, and for the price it's not bad. It has tons of ventilation, comes with 1 exhaust fan, and has an acrylic side panel. Not that there's going to be much to see, but it's there if you upgrade with more sicko mode looking components. My only complaint is that the PSU is exposed, so there's no shroud covering all the cables, so it doesn't look as clean as some other cases, but it's only 40 bucks. And finally, I went with the Thermaltake 500 watt power supply. It's 80 plus rated, and it meets the recommended requirements to power the GPU. it works. Now remember, part prices are always fluctuating. Even while I'm making this video, prices have changed. So as of right now, the grand total is $515.24. If you're able to get the A750 for $199, it'll bring the grand total to $495.24. Regardless, it's around the $500 price mark. Now you may ask, why do I have this PC next to me? Well, this build here has the i3-12100F, the Intel Arc A750. Yes, I do have a different motherboard, but remember, this is an i3-12100F. To take advantage of better motherboards that have more CPU pins or better heat dissipation, you'll need to go to like an i9. Higher end motherboards aren't really going to increase the performance on an i3. There will be little to no difference between this $80 one and the one I'm using. Now I am using a different SSD, but it's the same exact speed as the P3, so I was like, whatever, I'm just going to use this one. No need to get that one if it's the same speed. Neither of them have cache either. Now the fancy RAM I'm using is just for looks. It's the same exact speed as a silicone RAM, 16 gigs as well. The PSU I'm using is going to have zero effect on performance. Everything is pretty low powered, so let's just say the PSU I'm using meets the 500 watt requirement for this PC. Now the case I'm using can have an effect on temps, but I personally built in the Cooler Master case and airflow is pretty good. I know for a fact that heat won't be an issue, at least with these low powered components. And I know for a fact you don't party.
No, Kevin, I know for a fact you don't party.
But anyways,
let's party.
So this build should give you a pretty good idea of what to expect from this $500 build. So the first test I ran was the Cinebench test. During the multi-core test, the Ryzen 5 5500 pretty much manhandled the 12100F, which is expected because it does have 6 cores 12 threads as opposed to 4 cores 8 threads. But when it comes to the single core test,
well, how the turntables.
The i3-12100F is the one doing all the manhandling, which should help it excel in gaming. So now let's move from the boring stuff and let's talk about gaming. So the first game I ran was a Shadow of the Tomb Raider benchmark. So this game I played at 1080p ultra settings. At the beginning of the test, it seems like the Ryzen 5 5500 has a slow start, and I was hoping that it would get better as the test went on, but it didn't. It got worse and worse for the 5500, while the i3-12100F continued to kick its butt. I don't know why that clip was shown. I said kick its butt, not kiss its butt. But anyways. Now don't get me wrong, the 5500 is still a really good processor, especially for 1080p gaming. It's just the 12100F is better. At least in this game, it doesn't seem that more cores and more threads is gonna actually help. The 12100F ended up beating the 5500 by 38 FPS. Dang. The next test I ran was the Cyberpunk benchmark. This game I played at 1080p low settings. Cyberpunk's a pretty crazy game, and this is a $500 build, so that's why I have to go to low settings to get a good FPS. Once again, the 12100F jumps ahead, and it pretty much stays that way the rest of the test. Now both CPUs played it pretty well, but it's pretty crazy that the 12100F costs $15 less than the 5500, yet it's giving you about 30 frames per second better. And that was exactly the difference at the end of the test. Maybe I'm gonna jump on the Intel bandwagon. The next test I ran was the Red Dead Redemption 2 benchmark. Now in this game I have seen that more cores and more threads does help your FPS, and that was clearly shown because the FPS was a lot closer than the other games. This game was played at 1080p, medium settings, and overall I got really good FPS with both processors, finishing with 98 FPS with the 12100F and 92 FPS with the 5500. Both are pretty solid. Now the new Ryzen 5 5600X 3D actually got 97 FPS, so the 12100F even beat that one out. Pretty crazy. And then I finished it off with GTA 5. So I played this game at 1080p high settings. Both CPUs look really good, and there was no complaints about FPS. Although the 12100F once again seems like it's fighting for higher FPS. At times it would look like the FPS is very similar to the 5500, but overall it was averaging higher FPS. Although the 5500 did stay a little cooler than the 12100F, but those temps are nothing to worry about. 50s and 60s is pretty good. Both CPUs made it a really nice relaxing day at the beach. After all this testing, what does this all mean? Intel excels at single core performance, which is really the most important thing in gaming, and it was clearly shown in some games where the i3 pretty much obliterated the Ryzen 5 5500, which kind of made me sad because the Ryzen 5 5500 is one of my favorite processors. It's still a good processor, don't get me wrong, it's just the i3 did perform better. It's pretty clear that the i3 12100F is better. So if you just hate Intel, maybe they've bent you over too many times, by all means, go with the $500 AMD build with the Ryzen 5 5500. It won't disappoint. It's an awesome 1080p machine for only 500 bucks. But if you're wanting the best performance, the i3-12100F is going to give you better 1080p performance. I'm gonna keep it fair. I made fun of Intel fanboys last video. So for you AMD fanboys who think that I should have still gone with the AMD processor, this is what I have to say.
Talk to the hand.
All you need to know is if you go with the Intel A750 and the i3-12100F, you will have the best $500 build out there. It may not look pretty, but the performance may even impress your mom. Shit, it may even impress your mom's mom. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below, and let me know what other tests or videos you want to see in the comments. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. And like always, have a Sicko Mode day.